Welcome to the Weekly Report. It's March 5 and I'm Robert Barwick. In today's news, 1. Politicians be warned. Australia is in the same boat as Ireland, Egypt and Libya. 2. The Murray-Darling Basin plot is in disarray. And 3. Why most economists are certifiable. So first, politicians be warned. Australia is in the same boat as Ireland, Egypt and Libya. Australian politics is well and truly heating up. Now, this week, rather sensationally, Tony Windsor, the independent member for New England, revealed that he was the target of death threats, and he warned against the kind of language and the political climate in Australia is becoming dangerous. And he made references to Australia having the climate turning into the similar climate as the United States, which was the backdrop for the Arizona senator being shot last month. Now, it's an important observation. It's obviously in a context. What's really going on? Well, here's the bottom line. Australia is in the throes of a mass strike, just like the wave of revolutions that are sweeping the world in those other countries. And why do I say that? We don't see thousands of people on the street all over the place. However, we do see in pockets that's starting to happen. The main reason though why I say that is because what's driving the mass strike in those countries, which is the economic collapse of the world economy, which for them is manifested in things like the food shortage in the Middle East, things like the banking bailout and having their pension funds stolen in Ireland, which caused them to totally punish the government that agreed to it. Australia is in exactly the same economic crisis. Hang on a minute. We have the best economy in the world. We are prosperous. How could this be? Well, a lot of viewers will recognise the truth of what I'm about to say. All the claims that Australia's economy is prosperous are an absolute lie. Now, I just want to go through some of the things that bear that out, some of the things that everyone is going to relate to. But let me preface it by saying what I'm going to go through is a description of the real economy, the real Australia, not the stock market, not what politicians quote as statistics, the real economy. So first, what is the state of our economy? We have a cost of living crisis in this country. It's an absolute crisis between electricity, skyrocketing, which is energy, which everybody needs. Our standard of living is underpinned by energy, between the price of fuel, between the cost of housing, all these things which are about to be made worse by a carbon tax that Gillard puts on. People are being crunched. They're being crushed by the inflation that they're being subjected to, which officially doesn't exist according to the statistics. Also, our productive industries are being annihilated. We've focused here for the last quite a few months on the farming, irrigating farmers in the Murray-Darling Basin, our food bowl, all on the verge of being wiped out. We reported a few weeks ago about the South Australian forestry protest in Adelaide, where all the communities, the timber communities of the southeast corner of South Australia are all slated to be wiped out, and they recognise that. Look at the dairy farmers that are being crushed at the moment by this crazy price war, cooked up by British managers of Coles, which is a war not between Coles and Woolies, but between Coles and Woolies against the Australian dairy farmers. Something like over $700 million it's going to cost the dairy farmers in income this year collectively in Australia, and there's not enough dairy farmers left to be able to bear that $700 million cost. Bob Catter, the independent member for Kennedy, pointed out in the last few days, he's called for dairy farmers to be given an award rate for their milk, because he just gave some figures about dairy in his area. In 1981 there were 268 dairy farmers in his area. In the year 2000, when deregulation was imposed upon them, that was down to 185 dairy farmers. Today, 10 years after deregulation, there are 60 dairy farmers in Bob Katter's area, right? So that's an example of the kind of industrial annihilation that's going on in this country. Manufacturers are being wiped out. Now, this came up this week in the context of the carbon tax announcement by Julia Gillard. Gillard compared her carbon tax and the claims it will cost jobs with similar claims made about tariff cuts in the early 1990s, which she said were all unfounded, when actually what happened was the manufacturing industry of Australia collapsed by half as a percentage of our economy between 1985 and today, thanks to the tariff cuts. Not only did the industry, the total amount of industry collapse, the content of what we manufacture in Australia completely changed. We used to manufacture our daily necessities that we would manufacture them and consume them ourselves. We stopped manufacturing most of those things, including textile clothing and footwear, including even foodstuffs. Record amounts of manufactured food are now coming into Australia. We're no longer self-sufficient in manufactured food. And instead of manufacturing those things, we started manufacturing things that we could export, which just turned out to be inputs into other manufacturing processes of other countries. So the things that we used to be able to be self-sufficient in the sense that as Australians we knew that we could create anything that we needed in our own country, we no longer do anymore. So when they talk about manufacturing in Australia, what's left is not the strong manufacturing base we once had, and now that's about to be annihilated again. What's left by this tariff cut, by this carbon tax, and see all these things industrially, economically add up to the fact that the people are realising that they are being targeted for annihilation here. Everywhere they turn, the government is foisting something else upon them, which is destroying the things that underpin their living standard. The Australian people are on the edge, but the government of either stripe, Howard before Gillard and Rudd, are not backing away from pushing the British monetary policies that are pushing them over the edge. And consequently, the Australian people are reacting. And when your survival is at stake, don't be surprised if the reaction is not polite, Mr. Windsor. So, the bottom line for the members of Parliament, like Tony Windsor and the rest of them, any members of Parliament, any political parties who don't recognise what's going on in the Australian population are doomed. And we are one or two steps away from the kind of mass strike protests on the streets as has been witnessed in Egypt. In fact, we need an Egypt here in Australia, right? A peaceful deposing of power of not members of Parliament or any particular political party, of the system, the British imperial monetary system that's crushing us. All right, now let's focus on one aspect of this economic annihilation that's going on. Move on to my second report. The Murray-Darling Basin plot is in disarray. The whole plot to smash the Murray-Darling Basin as Australia's food bowl, you can say, has descended into a total farce. However, it's a dangerous farce. This week, ABARE, or I think they've changed their name a bit, but the Australian Bureau of Agriculture and Resource Economics and Sciences, now ABARES, they've produced a report. And the report says that the Murray-Darling Basin Authority's original claim that only 800 jobs would be lost as a consequence of the Murray-Darling Basin Authority's plan is wrong. ABARE has conceded that. It was a laughable, ridiculous claim. They've conceded that. They've said 5,000 jobs will be lost. Well, stop the presses. That's also ridiculous, but let's hear them out. 5,000 jobs, according to ABARES, will be lost in the short term. However, in the long term, no jobs will be lost as the economic activity of the basin swings over from irrigation agriculture to something else. All those jobs will be recreated in other forms. This is an absolute farce. Now, it's ridiculous. Let's just make one point here just to underscore that. The banks, the financial system whose job would be to finance any restructuring, economic restructuring of the region, the Murray-Darling Basin, from irrigation farming to either dryland farming or something else, the banks have already made it clear, as reported by Adrian Ritzer in the Ritzer report, that they will not finance any restructuring. So if they're not going to finance any restructuring, and the government is not going to set up a national bank to finance restructuring, nothing is going to replace irrigated farming. And if nothing replaces irrigated farming, it's not just 800 or 5,000 agricultural jobs that will be lost. It's thousands of farms, and it's almost all the towns in the Murray-Darling Basin whose whole existence is based on the agriculture in that area. You're not talking about tens of thousands, you're talking about hundreds of thousands. Over 2 million people live there whose livelihoods are underpinned by irrigated agriculture. This is we've gone from the real world into something, a farce that could only be conceived by someone like Jonathan Swift in Gulliver's Travels. Now, let me just say something. So we can ridicule this report, it's obviously nuts, but the way politics works is it's official reports like this that give the government something to cite to justify their plans. They will cite this report saying there's no evidence to the contrary. There's no official reports being done that provide evidence to the contrary. So that's the official report that they will cite to say we're pushing ahead with this. So yes, it's a farce, but like I said, it's a dangerous farce. Something else that underscores the quality of farce that's entered into this whole process though, and you get the sense from this one, it's like rats leaving the ship. Harvard professor John Briscoe, who's the former water advisor to the World Bank, he was also the head of the International Peer Review Group for the Murray-Darling Basin Authority's Guide to the Basin Plan. So he's had a lot to do with this process. He has come out with some very strong statements just in the last 24 hours about what a stuffed up process this whole thing was. Now, he's not coming at it from the standpoint of having something positive to input, but his observations are quite interesting. Let me just quote some of them. First of all, he's called for a total rewrite of the Water Act. And he made the point in a statement to a Senate inquiry. Professor Briscoe said there was no doubt the Water Act gave priority to the environment, and he said claims to the contrary were poppycock. And of course, everyone knows that. We've said that from the beginning. Even slow off the mark Barnaby Joyce originally came to that conclusion eventually. There is no triple bottom line approach in the Water Act. It's all about the environment first and everything else can get stuffed. So he's admitting that. He also gives some insights into how the process was run. Now, this is a guy, former water advisor of the World Bank, water expert on a global level. He said his involvement with the Murray-Darling Basin plan was dogged by the most elaborate confidentiality measures he had ever seen. So this was done in a very underhanded way. Everything was strictly confidential because when they finally foisted on the public last October, they knew what the explosion they were about to unleash, and he's sort of giving an insight into that. He said he told Rob Freeman, the chairman, and the chief executive, and former chairman Mike Taylor, to tell the government that the Water Act would not and could not work. That was a quote. And he said, quote, "We were given to believe there was no appetite for such a message at higher levels in the government in Canberra." So in other words, they didn't want to listen. They're just ploughing ahead regardless. Now, where was Briscoe coming from? Was he wanting to fight for the rights of irrigators here? No. In this report that was in today's Age newspaper and Sydney Morning Herald, Professor Briscoe took a dim view of plans to spend taxpayers' money on the modernisation of irrigation infrastructure. This is what he said, quote, "This is a very expensive way to save water, and many of the investments will be made in areas that will, sooner or later, go out of production." So this guy's no friend of the farmers. However, he's reflecting that the whole process that's produced an outcome that will just annihilate the food bowl was stuffed up from the get-go. It's not just because he reflects this doesn't mean that's the end of the process. The farmers should take heart. Like I said, it just underscores it's a farce. It's a dangerous farce. The only way to stop the kind of intentional annihilation of agriculture that the Murray-Darling Basin Plan represents is to get rid of the system that's producing it, and that means fighting with the CEC's mobilisation on this. All right, and finally, in the time I've got left, I just want to bring to the attention of viewers, and I might do some of these in the future as well. I've called this Why Most Economists Are Certifiable. Because economists are the ones who are the expert advisors on how the economy should be run, and most people wouldn't have the foggiest idea how radically different economists view the economy to the way normal people do. So some examples of that, which may be well known to some, not to others. You know, economists view 5% unemployment as full employment. Why? Because to an economist, you always need to have a pool of people that are competing for jobs, so that pool of competitors can help keep wages lower for the people who have jobs. So 5% unemployment, which everyone else would say, well, that's unemployment. No, to them that's full employment. Economists say that people who don't look for work anymore because they've given up out of demoralisation, they don't count as unemployed. Why? Because to an economist, unemployment is looked at just purely in market terms. Unless people are actively part of a market looking for jobs, then they don't have a market impact, therefore they're not counted. And that's why the Centrelink figures of unemployment are always much greater than the official jobless figures that you get cited. Yeah, there's some common things that economists carry on about. I want to highlight one thing though that's relevant right now in the Australian economy. Everyone is talking about the cost of living crisis, but on the other hand, everyone's talking about that there's a retail crisis in the country because people, Australians, are not spending. And the economists are making a point, Australians are not spending their income because they're saving their income. Well, hang on a minute. What have they got left to save after they pay their electricity bill, their fuel bill, their mortgage? What have they got left to save? Nothing. Do they mean, when they say saving, what we mean when we say saving? Do they mean people putting money away in a bank account and growing a little nest egg? No. Hell no. What economists mean by saving is that the habit people were encouraged into aggressively before the GFC was to tap into their equity, continually borrow against the equity in their homes, created not by their paying off their homes, but by rising property values. The property market goes up and the bank manager would say to his customers, hey, look, you've got this much left owing on your mortgage, but your property's gone up in value, so you've got all this much equity in your home. You could borrow against that. You could buy a new car, you could buy a new boat, you could buy a new holiday, whatever you want, right? And that kind of equity borrowing was driving a lot of consumer spending before the GFC. Well, lawfully, that's not happening anymore. People aren't doing that. What people are doing is they are paying their mortgages down. Now, they're not paying them down extra, they're just paying their mortgages. Why? Because Australians who have mortgages are debt slaves. They know that. Most Australians have had a sufficient enough fright from what's happened in the economy. They're paying down their mortgages. And to an economist, paying down existing debt instead of spending the income in the shops is savings. So when you hear the news reports and the newspapers say Australians are saving, that's what they mean. It's a joke. It's worse than a joke. As they say, lies, damn lies, and statistics. And it gives you the insight that all politicians who listen to this rubbish and all economists are as deluded as Muammar Gaddafi, my people love me. So on that note, that's it for this week's weekly report. Stay tuned for more updates.